Stop crying. You'll walk again. The words, spoken by a tiny voice, cut through the heavy silence of the enormous, sun-filled bedroom. 5-year-old Lily stood in the doorway, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her big, serious brown eyes were fixed on the man in the wheelchair, a man who had forgotten what it felt like to stand. David Davison, a millionaire whose name was once a symbol of strength and power, looked up. His face was pale and thin, and fresh tears streamed down his cheeks, landing on the expensive cashmere blanket covering his useless legs. In front of him knelt his beautiful fiancée, Victoria, dabbing his eyes with a silk handkerchief. "Oh, you poor dear," Victoria cooed, her voice like smooth honey. "Don't listen to her. She's just a silly little girl." The two nurses standing by the bed exchanged a look, and one of them let out a small, mocking laugh. "Children say the strangest things," she whispered to the other. David stared at the little girl. He had only seen her a few times, quietly following her mother, the new housekeeper, around the mansion. He had never heard her speak a single word until now. Her voice, though small, was filled with a strange and powerful certainty. "What did you say?" David asked, his own voice raspy from disuse and sorrow. Lily took a brave step forward. "I said, you need to stop crying," she repeated, her gaze unwavering. "Crying makes you weak. You need to be strong because you are going to walk again." This time Victoria didn't just coo. She turned and glared at Lily, her perfectly shaped eyebrows furrowed in anger. "That's enough. How dare you say such cruel things to a man in his condition? You're giving him false hope. Now get out." But Lily didn't move. She ignored the beautiful, angry woman and kept her eyes locked on David. She saw the flicker of something deep in his eyes, not hope, but a deep, drowning despair that broke her little heart. She knew he didn't believe her. She knew no one did. They all thought he was broken forever. But Lily knew a secret. A terrible, dark secret she had discovered in this big, sad house. And in that moment she did something that no one could have ever predicted. She took another step forward, pointed a tiny, trembling finger not at David, but at the glass of green health smoothie in Victoria's hand, a smoothie Victoria was about to give to David. "And you need to stop drinking that," Lily said, her voice now a loud, clear bell in the silent room. "That's why you can't walk. It's poison." But to understand how a 5-year-old girl could say something so shocking, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to a time when David Davison wasn't a man in a wheelchair, but a king in a city he had built himself. Just 1 year earlier, David Davison was known as the City Shaper. He was a brilliant architect, a man whose imagination created the magnificent skyscrapers that touched the clouds. He was strong, confident, and kind. At 40 years old, he had everything: a billion-dollar company, the respect of the entire city, and a beautiful fiancée, Victoria Vance, who was a famous model. Victoria was like a woman from a dream. She had hair the color of gold, eyes the color of the summer sky, and a smile that could make anyone feel special. Everyone said they were the perfect couple. David was the strong, brilliant builder, and Victoria was his beautiful prize. He was planning to build their future home at the very top of his greatest achievement, the Phoenix Tower, a skyscraper so tall and elegant it looked like it was rising from the sun. But then came the day that shattered everything. It was a cold Tuesday in October. David was at the top of the Phoenix Tower, which was still under construction. He was checking the final support beams on the rooftop, a place where he felt most alive with the whole city spread out beneath him like a map. He wasn't wearing his safety harness. He had done this walk 1,000 times. It was as natural to him as breathing. No one knows exactly what happened. One moment he was standing there, the king of the world. The next, a powerful gust of wind, a misplaced tool, a moment of distraction, and he was falling. He didn't fall all the way to the ground. A web of safety netting 50 floors below caught him, but it was too late. He had hit a steel girder on the way down. The sound of his own back breaking was a sickening crack that echoed in his memory forever. The world went from a symphony of success to the sterile, quiet beep of a hospital heart monitor. Dr. Evans, a kind man with sad eyes, delivered the news. "I'm so sorry, David," he said, his voice gentle. "The impact shattered your T10 vertebra. The damage to your spinal cord is severe. You'll never walk again." The words were a death sentence. David Davison, the city shaper, the man who moved mountains of steel and glass, couldn't even move his own toes. His world hadn't just changed, it had ended. In that dark, hopeless room, Victoria was his only light. She rushed to his bedside, her beautiful face streaked with tears. She held his hand and made a promise. "I will never leave you, my love," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "It doesn't matter if you can't walk. I love you. I will be your legs. I will take care of you forever. We will get through this together. Her words were the only thing that kept him from giving up completely. Victoria was true to her word. She had him moved back to his grand mansion, a place that now felt more like a prison. She dismissed the team of professional nurses he had hired. They're cold and impersonal, darling, she told him, fluffing his pillow. They don't love you. Only I can give you the care you truly need. For the first few months she was an angel of mercy. She learned how to use the hoist to move him from his bed to his custom-made wheelchair. She cooked his meals, read to him, and managed all his business affairs, telling him not to worry his handsome head about it. David felt a wave of guilt and overwhelming love. He had lost everything, but he still had her. He was the luckiest man in the world. But then, something strange began to happen. According to Dr. Evans, while David's legs were paralyzed, the rest of his body should have been recovering. His upper body strength should have been returning. But it wasn't. In fact, he seemed to be getting weaker. His powerful arms, which he now needed for everything, felt as heavy as lead. His hands would tremble so badly he couldn't hold a fork. He was tired all the time, sleeping for 10 or 12 hours a day and still waking up exhausted. Sometimes, a strange fog would cloud his mind, making it hard to think, hard to remember things. I don't understand it, David told Dr. Evans during a checkup, his voice weak. I feel like I'm fading away. Dr. Evans was confused too. He ran every test imaginable. Blood tests, brain scans, muscle biopsies. Every single one came back perfectly normal. I'm stumped, David, the doctor admitted, scratching his graying hair. Physically, apart from your legs, you should be much stronger. Could be depression. A trauma like yours, it can have powerful physical effects on the body. David felt a cold dread creep into his heart. Was this it? Was his mind now breaking along with his body? Victoria comforted him as always. Don't worry, my love, she'd say, stroking his hair. The doctor is right. You're just sad. It's completely understandable. That's why you have me. I'll make you strong again. Every morning, she would bring him her special Victoria's Vitality smoothie. It was a thick, green drink made of kale, spinach, and other healthy things. I've added special vitamins and herbal supplements, she would explain with a bright smile. They'll help clear the fog from your mind and give you energy. You must drink every last drop. David trusted her completely. He drank the smoothie every morning, believing it was an act of love. He didn't know that it was something else entirely. 2 months ago, the old housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, quit suddenly. Victoria had told him the woman was getting too old and forgetful. A week later, a new housekeeper arrived. Her name was Maria, a quiet woman with kind eyes and a gentle presence. She was a single mother, and with her came her 5-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was a silent child. She would sit in a corner of whatever room her mother was cleaning, drawing in her notepad or playing with a single small doll. She never made a sound, but she saw everything. Her big brown eyes missed nothing. She saw the way Victoria's bright smile would instantly vanish the moment she thought no one was looking. She saw the way Victoria's sweet, loving voice would turn cold and sharp when she spoke to the delivery men or the gardeners. And she saw the secret of the green smoothie. Every morning, like clockwork, Victoria would go into the large pantry in the kitchen to prepare David's drink. Lily, from her hiding spot behind a large potted plant in the hallway, would watch. Victoria would blend the vegetables and fruits. But then came the final step. She would walk to a small locked cabinet high on the pantry wall, a cabinet no one else ever opened. She would unlock it with a tiny key she wore on a chain around her neck. From inside, she would take out a small, unlabeled brown bottle with a dropper cap. Carefully, she would squeeze exactly 5 clear drops into the smoothie, her face a mask of intense concentration. Then she would lock the cabinet, put the key back around her neck, and stir the drink before taking it to David. Lily knew, with the certainty that only a child can possess, that this was wrong. The vitamins her own mother gave her came in a colorful bottle with a picture of a smiling cartoon bear on it. Victoria's bottle was dark and scary. It was a secret. Lily's chance to uncover that secret came one rainy afternoon. Victoria was on the phone in the library shouting at someone about a stock market deal. She had been in a hurry and, for the first time ever, she had forgotten to lock the pantry cabinet. Lily saw the key still dangling from the lock. Her heart started beating like a drum. Her mother was upstairs, cleaning the bedrooms. No one was watching. With trembling hands, Lily pulled a small stool over to the pantry wall. She climbed up, her small fingers reaching for the key. She turned it and the cabinet door creaked open. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just one brown bottle. It was a whole row of them. 5 identical brown bottles, all without labels. But behind them, tucked away in the very back corner, was a sixth bottle. This one was different. It had a white label with a skull and crossbones on it, and words she couldn't read. But she knew what the picture meant. Danger. Her eyes widened in horror. She knew without a doubt that this was the bottle Victoria was using. The lady with the beautiful smile was putting drops from a danger bottle into the sick man's drink. And that's when Lily knew. This wasn't medicine. This was a secret that was making the sad, crying man in the wheelchair even sicker. And she was the only one who knew the truth. The world seemed to stop. In that cold, dusty pantry, 5-year-old Lily stared at the proof of the evil hiding in her new home. 5 identical brown bottles stood in a neat line, like soldiers guarding a secret. But it was the 6th bottle hidden in the back that made her blood run cold. The one with the skull and crossbones. A picture she knew meant only one thing: danger, poison. Her tiny hands gripped the wooden stool so tightly her knuckles turned white. The beautiful Lady Victoria was not a friend. She was not an angel. She was a monster, and she was feeding Mr. Davison poison every single morning. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps. Lily's head snapped towards the sound coming from the hallway. Victoria was coming back. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed at her chest. She looked at the key dangling from the cabinet lock. She couldn't possibly lock it in time. If Victoria found the cabinet open, she would know someone had been inside. She would know her secret was discovered. Lily's mind raced. In a split-second decision, driven by an instinct she didn't understand, she did the only thing she could think of. Her small hand darted out. She didn't grab one of the 5 identical bottles in the front. She knew, somehow, that the one in the back was the most important. Her fingers closed around the small glass bottle with the terrible warning sign. It was cold to the touch. She shoved it deep into the pocket of her little blue dress, the glass clinking silently against a crayon she had hidden there earlier. She didn't dare look back. She scrambled off the stool, slid it back against the wall with a soft scrape, and slipped out of the pantry just as Victoria's shadow fell across the kitchen doorway. Lily flattened herself behind the large potted plant in the hall, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure Victoria could hear it. Victoria walked into the kitchen, still talking on her phone, a deep frown on her face. "The transfer has to be seamless," she said, her voice sharp and cold. She walked right past the pantry, snatched a bottle of water from the fridge and left, completely unaware that her entire evil plan had just been discovered by a 5-year-old girl. Lily waited until the sound of her clicking heels faded away before she let out the breath she had been holding. She felt the hard shape of the bottle in her pocket. It felt like a heavy, dangerous stone. Later that evening, in the small, simple room she shared with her mother, Lily knew she couldn't keep the bottle where someone might find it. She had a special friend, a worn-out teddy bear named Barnaby. Barnaby had a small tear in the seam on his back, a secret pocket where Lily kept her most precious treasures: a shiny rock, a bluebird's feather, and a heart-shaped button. With trembling fingers, she pushed the shiny rock and the feather aside and carefully slid the cold glass bottle deep inside Barnaby's stuffing. She then placed the bear back on her pillow, making him look like he was sleeping. Now he wasn't just her friend, he was the keeper of her terrible secret. The weight of that secret felt too big for her small shoulders. The next day, while her mother, Maria, was polishing the grand dining table, Lily tried to find the right words to explain the unexplainable. "Mama," she began, tugging on her mother's apron, "can medicine look just like water?" Maria didn't look up from her work, her arm moving in strong, circular motions. "I suppose so, honey. But you know the rule. We never, ever touch medicine that isn't ours. It's for grown-ups and it can be very dangerous." Lily's heart sank. Her mother didn't understand. She tried again, her voice barely a whisper. "But, what if a grown-up is using bad medicine? To hurt someone?" This time Maria stopped polishing. She knelt down and looked into Lily's serious eyes. Her face was kind but also tired and worried. "Lily, my sweet girl," she said softly, "you have such a big imagination. But you must not make up scary stories, especially not here. Miss Victoria has been very good to us. This job, it's a blessing. We can't do anything to risk losing it. So no more scary talk, okay? Promise me." Lily looked into her mother's pleading eyes and nodded slowly. A promise was a promise. But as she walked away, a cold, lonely feeling washed over her. Her mother wouldn't believe her. No one would. She was completely and utterly alone with this secret. The next morning, Lily was in her usual hiding spot behind the plant. She watched as Victoria came into the kitchen to make the green smoothie. Victoria unlocked the cabinet, her back to the hallway. Lily saw her shoulders suddenly go stiff. She saw her hand fly to her neck, then back to the cabinet, frantically searching. Victoria spun around, her eyes wide with panic, scanning the empty kitchen. The bottle was gone and she knew it. For a moment, Victoria looked like a trapped animal. Her beautiful face was twisted with fear and fury. Then she took a deep breath, composed herself and grabbed one of the other 5 bottles. She added the drops to the smoothie, but her movements were jerky and angry. Later that day, the proof of Lily's victory came in a way she never expected. She was sitting at the top of the grand staircase, hidden from view, when she heard Victoria's hushed, frantic voice coming from the study below. "I'm telling you it's gone." Victoria hissed into her phone. "The entire bottle. It just vanished. I've looked everywhere." Lily held her breath, listening with all her might. "Yes, I'm using the backup formula," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with frustration. "But it's not as strong. It's much, much slower. We can't afford this, Marcus. The timeline is everything. What if he starts getting stronger? What if his mind clears up before we're ready?" There was a pause. Lily's eyes grew wide. "Marcus? Who was Marcus? A timeline?" "No, he doesn't suspect a thing," Victoria snapped. "He still thinks I'm a saint. He drank his smoothie like a good little boy. Just get me another bottle of the primary. And this time be more careful. If anyone finds out what we're doing, it's all over." A new wave of terror washed over Lily. Victoria wasn't working alone. She had a partner. And they were on a schedule. A few days passed. Because Victoria was now using the weaker poison from the backup bottle, a tiny, almost unnoticeable change began to happen in David. One afternoon, Lily watched from his doorway as he sat in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at the garden. A gust of wind blew the pages of the book on his lap, causing it to slide off and land on the floor just out of his reach. In the past, David would have sighed in defeat and waited for Victoria to come and pick it up. But not today. A flicker of his old determination sparked in his eyes. He leaned forward, his arm outstretched, his fingers straining. His hand trembled violently, the muscles weak and unused. He grunted with effort, his face turning red. Lily held her breath, silently cheering him on. And then it happened. His fingers managed to hook around the spine of the book. Slowly, painfully, he dragged it across the carpet and lifted it back onto his lap. He stared down at his hand, then at the book, a look of pure astonishment on his face. It was the first time in nearly a year that he had been able to do something so simple, yet so impossible. A sliver of strength, a glimmer of hope, had returned. At that exact moment, Victoria walked into the room. She saw the book clutched in David's hand and the dazed, hopeful look on his face. Lily, watching from the hall, saw it all. For one brief, unguarded second, she saw the mask of the loving fiancé fall away. Victoria's eyes widened, and a look of pure, cold panic flashed across her face. It was the look of a spider who just saw a fly beginning to pull itself free from the web. Then, just as quickly, the mask was back in place. She rushed to his side, her face beaming with a fake, joyful smile. "Oh, David, my love. Look at you," she exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "That's incredible. I told you my vitality smoothies would work. You're getting your strength back. I'm so proud of you." David, still lost in the fog of his condition and desperate to believe in any good news, looked at her with gratitude. "You were right, Victoria. I think I do feel a little bit stronger." He didn't see the fear in her eyes. But Lily did. And she knew that Victoria's fear made her more dangerous than ever. That night, a storm raged outside the mansion, mirroring the storm in Lily's heart. She couldn't sleep. She knew Victoria was scared, and she knew that scared people did desperate things. A terrible feeling urged her to get out of bed. Barefoot and silent, she tiptoed out of her room and down the dark, winding staircase. A single sliver of light was escaping from under the door of David's study, a huge, wood-paneled room he never used anymore. The door was open just a crack. Lily's heart pounded as she crept closer, her small eye pressed to the gap. Victoria was inside, standing by David's massive oak desk. And she was not alone. A tall, thin man with slicked-back hair and a cruel-looking face stood beside her. He had to be Marcus. They were hunched over a stack of official-looking papers. "You have to get him to sign these tomorrow, Victoria," Marcus whispered, his voice a low hiss. "Especially this one. The full power of attorney. As soon as his signature is on that paper, it's over." We can begin the final transfer of all his assets. Victoria wrung her hands, her voice trembling with anxiety. He's getting stronger, Marcus. I saw it today. The backup formula is too weak. His mind, it's getting clearer. This morning he asked me about the quarterly earnings report for the first time in months. He's starting to remember who he was. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, but it wasn't a comforting gesture. It was cold and controlling. He leaned in closer, and his next words were so chilling they seemed to freeze the very air Lily was breathing. Then we have no choice, Marcus whispered. We have to accelerate the plan. Forget the slow method. It's time for a tragic accident. A paralyzed man in a big empty house? He could slip in the bath. Have a fall down the stairs in his wheelchair. It's a tragedy, but accidents happen all the time. No one would ever question it. Lily clapped a hand over her own mouth to stifle a gasp. Her eyes were wide with terror. They weren't just making him sick anymore. They were going to kill him. The words hit Lily harder than any physical blow. Tragic accident. They weren't just making Mr. Davison sick anymore. They were going to kill him. Her small body trembled, and a wave of nausea washed over her. The grand, beautiful mansion suddenly felt like a monster's lair, and she was trapped inside with the monster. She backed away from the door, one tiny, silent step at a time. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a scream in the silent house. She turned and fled, her bare feet making no sound on the thick, plush carpets. She ran up the winding staircase, the same staircase Marcus had mentioned with such coldness, and didn't stop until she was safely back in her room. She dove into her small bed and pulled the covers over her head, shutting out the darkness of the house, but she couldn't shut out the darkness in her mind. She reached for Barnaby the bear and hugged him tightly. The glass bottle hidden inside his stuffing felt like a chunk of ice against her chest. Was the proof? Was the poison? But what could she do with it? Who could she show it to? Her own mother thought she was making up stories. If she told a police officer, would they believe a 5-year-old girl over the beautiful, charming Miss Victoria? She knew they wouldn't. The terrible truth fell upon her like a physical weight. David Davison's life was in her hands. A little girl against 2 grown-up monsters. A tiny whisper against a powerful lie. The thought was so terrifying, so impossible that for a moment all she could do was hide and tremble. The next morning the storm outside had passed, but the storm inside the mansion was just beginning. An invisible electricity crackled in the air. When Lily crept downstairs, she saw Victoria arranging David's breakfast on a silver tray. Her smile was brighter than usual, her movements more energetic. It was the kind of cheerful energy that made Lily's stomach clench with fear. It was the smile of a hunter closing in on its prey. On the tray, next to the bowl of oatmeal and the dreaded green smoothie, was a sleek leather folder containing the stack of papers Lily had seen the night before. Victoria glided into David's bedroom, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Good morning, my love. I've brought you a delicious breakfast to help you build up your strength." Lily watched from the doorway, hiding behind a large vase. Victoria placed the tray on David's lap. "And here are just a few of those boring company papers we talked about," she said casually, tapping the leather folder. "My hand is getting so cramped from signing everything for you. It would be such a big help if you could just add your signature to these for me. It will make everything so much easier." David, who seemed a little more alert than usual, looked at the folder. "All of them? What are they for, Victoria?" Victoria didn't miss a beat. Her laugh sounded like tiny, tinkling bells. "Oh, the usual tedious things, darling. Standard quarterly reports, stock authorizations for the board members. You know I handle all of this for you. Don't you trust me?" Her words were a gentle trap. For months he had surrendered all his trust to her. Questioning her now felt like a betrayal. He gave a weak, tired sigh. "Of course I trust you, Victoria. I'll look at them after my bath." A flicker of triumph flashed in Victoria's eyes. "Wonderful," she said. "I'll go run the water for you right now. I have some special new bath oils from France. They're incredibly soothing, but they do make the marble a little slippery. I'll be extra careful with you." Slippery. The word shot through Lily like an alarm bell. A fall in the bath. This was it. This was the accident they had planned. Lily's mind spun. She had to stop him from taking that bath. She had to stop him from signing those papers. She needed to do something so disruptive, so messy, that Victoria's perfectly scheduled plan would be completely ruined. An idea sparked in her mind, a desperate, chaotic 5-year-old's idea. She knew how much Victoria hated messes. Victoria would patrol the house like a general, pointing out a single speck of dust on a table or a fingerprint on a window. A big mess would be like a declaration of war. She waited until she heard the sound of water running in the master bathroom. She knew her mother was outside, shaking out the rugs. She knew David was alone in his room, slowly eating his breakfast. This was her only chance. She snuck into the kitchen. On the counter was a large, open jar of her favorite strawberry jam, glistening a deep, vibrant red. It was for the toast, but Lily had a much different plan for it. Her small hands struggled to lift the heavy glass jar. She hugged it to her chest and tiptoed out of the kitchen and towards the grand winding staircase. The staircase was Victoria's pride and joy. It was made of pristine white marble that her mother spent an hour polishing every single day. Lily took a deep breath. She closed her eyes and thought of Mr. Davison's sad face. Then, with all her might, she let the jar slip from her grasp. Crash! The sound was explosive in the quiet mansion. The glass jar shattered and the thick, sticky red jam went everywhere. It splattered across the perfect white marble steps, oozed down the risers, and pooled at the bottom in a gruesome, sticky puddle. In the morning light it looked shockingly like blood. Lily let out a loud, piercing wail, a fake cry of shock and pain. "My foot! I tripped," she screamed. It worked. The sound of the running water in the bathroom stopped abruptly. A moment later Victoria came storming out of David's bedroom, her face a mask of irritation. "What is all that racket?" she started to say, but the words died in her throat when she saw the staircase. Her jaw dropped. Her perfectly calm, controlled expression melted away into pure, unrestrained fury. The mess was so huge, so shockingly red and sticky, that for a moment her plan for the accident was completely forgotten. "Lily," she shrieked, her voice no longer smooth honey but jagged glass. "What have you done?" Maria came running in from the garden, her face pale with alarm. She saw the disaster on the stairs and her daughter crying at the top. "Oh, Miss Victoria. I'm so sorry. Lily, are you okay?" "Oh, this is a disaster." Maria rushed to Lily, checking her for injuries while apologizing over and over again. Victoria stood at the bottom of the stairs, her hands clenched into fists, her whole body shaking with rage. The beautiful, caring fiancé was gone, replaced by a furious tyrant. "Clean this up. Clean every last drop of it now," she screamed at Maria. "And keep that clumsy, useless child out of my sight." The commotion brought David to his bedroom door in his wheelchair. He saw the chaos on the stairs, heard Victoria screaming, and saw a terrified Lily being pulled away by her mother. The distraction was a success. It was loud, messy, and undeniable. There would be no bath for David now. There would be no signing of papers. Victoria was completely consumed by the jam disaster, her mind derailed from her murderous plan. Lily, while being scolded by her frantic mother, felt a small, secret thrill of victory. She had bought him time. But she also knew she had just made a very powerful enemy. Hours later, the house was quiet again. The jam was gone, but the anger remained. Victoria had barely spoken a word, her silence more menacing than her screams. In his room, David felt a strange sense of clarity. Perhaps it was the adrenaline from the morning's chaos, or perhaps it was the weaker dose of poison finally losing its grip, but the fog in his brain had receded slightly. He felt more like himself. His eyes fell on the leather folder still sitting on his bedside table. Victoria had been so distracted, she'd forgotten to take it with him. He had promised to sign the papers, and a part of him, the part that had been trained to trust her for a year, told him to do it now. But another part, a small, cautious voice he hadn't heard in a very long time, the voice of David Davison, the city shaper, the brilliant and careful businessman, told him to wait. "Always read the fine print," David, his father, used to say. Driven by this flicker of his old self, he opened the folder. He lifted the top document. He expected to see company logos, charts, and financial jargon. Instead, he saw two words in large, bold letters at the top of the page. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a quarterly report. He knew exactly what this document was. It wasn't about making things easier. It was a legal weapon. It would give the holder complete, absolute, and irreversible control over his entire estate, his companies, his fortune, his life. His hand, steadier than it had been all day, began to tremble again, but this time from shock, not weakness. He frantically flipped to the next page. It was a stock liquidation form. The next was a property transfer deed. The next, a request to shift all the money from his primary corporate account to a new, unnamed private account. This wasn't just helping him run his business. This was a blueprint for erasing him from his own empire. The fog in his mind didn't just part, it shattered. Suddenly, everything became terrifyingly clear. His growing weakness. The doctors finding nothing wrong. Victoria insisting on caring for him alone. Her sweet words. Her green smoothie. He looked at the signature line waiting for his name, then at the expensive pen resting beside it. The pieces of the puzzle were floating in his mind, and they were beginning to form a picture so monstrous, so unthinkable, that his entire body went cold. He stared at the papers, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror, the truth finally hitting him like a physical blow. He whispered the words into the silent, empty room, his voice filled with disbelief and terror. "What is this? Victoria, what are you doing to me?" In that single devastating moment, the world David thought he knew burned to the ground. The woman he loved, the angel who had promised to be his arms and legs, was a serpent. Her soft hands were not there to care for him, but to control him. Her sweet words were not whispers of love, but the lyrics of a lie, a lullaby meant to keep him asleep while she stole his entire world from under him. He felt a terrifying, cold wave of helplessness wash over him, worse than any he had felt in the hospital. He was paralyzed. He was weak. He was a prisoner in his own home, and his jailer was the one person he had trusted with his life. What could he do? If he confronted her, if he showed her even a flicker of suspicion, what would happen? She was clever. She would twist his words, call him confused, paranoid. With the doctors already convinced his mind was clouded by depression, she could easily have him declared mentally incompetent. She could have him locked away in a private hospital where no one would ever listen to him again. He had to play the part. He had to remain the weak, helpless, trusting fool she believed him to be. He heard the soft click of her heels in the hallway. She was coming back. With fumbling, panicked hands, he shoved the papers back into the leather folder, straightening them just as the bedroom door opened. Victoria glided in, a calm smile on her face now that the jam disaster was handled. "Feeling better, my love?" she asked, her voice once again like smooth honey. David forced himself to look up at her, forcing a tired, weak smile onto his own face. He hated the lie, but he knew his life depended on it. "Yes, much better. I'm sorry, Victoria. I was just so exhausted after all that commotion this morning. I didn't get to the papers. I'll sign them for you tomorrow, I promise." Victoria's smile tightened just a fraction. A flicker of impatience in her eyes. "Of course, darling. You rest. Tomorrow is a new day." She leaned down and kissed his forehead. Her lips felt like ice against his skin. As she left the room, David let his fake smile crumble. The game had begun. It was a terrifying game of cat and mouse, but he wasn't the cat. He was the mouse, trapped in a cage, pretending to be asleep while the cat watched his every move. That night, sleep was impossible. David lay awake in the darkness, replaying the last year in his mind. But now he was watching it with new eyes. Every memory was tainted, every act of kindness was now a calculated move in her evil game. Her insistence on dismissing the nurses, so there would be no professional witnesses. Her control over his meals and drinks, so she could poison him undetected. Her handling of all his business, so she could weave her web of theft. And then another memory broke through the fog so sharp and clear it made him gasp. It was the little girl Lily. He remembered her standing in this very room, her tiny face filled with a fierce seriousness. "Stop drinking that. That's why you can't walk. It's poison." At the time, he'd been heartbroken, thinking she was just being a cruel child. But now her words sounded like a desperate alarm bell that he had been too sick to hear. He thought of the jam on the stairs. An accident? No, it couldn't have been. It happened right before Victoria was going to give him a bath, right after she mentioned the slippery floor. It wasn't an accident. It was a rescue. A 5-year-old girl, a child he barely knew, was trying to save his life. He wasn't alone in this house after all. He had an ally. The smallest, bravest ally in the world. He knew he had to talk to her, to warn her, to thank her. But how? Victoria was always watching. Maria was always with her daughter. He needed to create an opportunity, a moment where no one would be suspicious. The next afternoon he put his own plan into motion. On a high bookshelf in his room was a heavy box filled with old family photographs. With a grunt of effort, using a long-handled grabber, he managed to tip the box just enough. It toppled over, crashing to the floor and scattering hundreds of photos across the carpet, many of them sliding deep under his large, immovable bed. "Victoria," he called out, his voice filled with fake distress. "Oh no. My mother's old photos. I can't reach them." Victoria came in, sighing dramatically at the mess. "Honestly, David, you must be more careful." "I'm so sorry," he said, looking helpless. "Could you please ask Maria to come and pick them up for me? I don't want them to get damaged." It was the perfect excuse. A few minutes later, Maria came in with Lily trailing quietly behind her. Maria knelt down, her head and shoulders disappearing under the bed as she began gathering the scattered photos. Lily stood near the foot of the bed, watching her mother. Victoria had already left, bored by the cleanup. This was his chance. David rolled his wheelchair silently closer to the little girl. He leaned in, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Lily." She looked up, her big brown eyes wide and intelligent. "The jam," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "On the stairs. You did that on purpose, didn't you?" Lily's eyes filled with a solemn understanding. She didn't speak. She just gave a single tiny nod. "She was going to hurt you in the bath," she whispered back, her own voice a secret. David's heart ached with gratitude. "And the smoothie," he pressed on. "What you said that day, about the poison. Was it true?" This time, she reached into the pocket of her dress and her little hand closed around something. She didn't take it out, but he could see the determined look on her face. "She puts drops from a scary bottle in it every morning. It has a danger picture on it. A skull." Her eyes darted towards the door nervously. "I have it. I took the real one. It's safe." The confirmation sent a shockwave through him. It was real. The poison was real. The little girl had the proof. "Lily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the bravest person I have ever met. Keep that bottle hidden. Keep it safe. Do not tell anyone you have it. Can you do that for me?" She nodded again, her expression serious and proud. In that moment, a silent, powerful alliance was formed. A paralyzed millionaire and a 5-year-old girl, united against the evil that surrounded them. But their time was running out. That evening, the pressure in the house became unbearable. Lily was playing quietly in the upstairs hallway when she heard voices coming from Victoria's room. The door was open a crack and she could hear Marcus's angry hiss. "I don't care about a messy staircase, Victoria. He still hasn't signed the papers. My contacts at the bank are telling me the internal auditors are starting to ask questions about the transfers I've already made. We are running out of time." "I know that." Victoria snapped back. "But he's acting strange. He's more alert. I can't just force him to sign it, it would look suspicious. I need him weak and confused again." "Then you know what you have to do," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a deadly low. "No more games. No more delays. The accident has to happen. Tomorrow. We finish this tomorrow." Lily scurried away, her heart pounding with a new and immediate terror. Tomorrow. They were going to kill him tomorrow. That evening at dinner, Victoria was a different person. She was overly cheerful, her sweetness so thick and heavy it felt suffocating. She had insisted on having dinner in the grand formal dining room, something they hadn't done in months. "A special celebration, my love," she announced, placing a steaming bowl of creamy tomato soup in front of David. "A celebration of you getting your strength back." David looked at the soup. It was his favorite, but his stomach twisted into a knot of pure fear. He knew with absolute certainty that it was laced with poison. Not the weaker backup formula, but something much stronger. Something meant to make him so sick, so helpless that tomorrow's accident would be easy. Lily was standing in the grand archway of the dining room, pretending to play with her doll, but her eyes were locked on the soup bowl, wide with terror. She knew what was happening. Her gaze met David's, and in that silent, shared look, a desperate plan was communicated. Victoria turned her back to them to open a bottle of expensive red wine at the sideboard. "A toast," she said, her voice full of false joy. "To our future." This was his only chance. David took a deep, shuddering breath. He thought of Lily's bravery. He thought of his own life hanging by a thread. He channeled every ounce of his returning strength into his next move. He let out a loud, guttural cry and threw his body to the side, faking a violent, uncontrollable muscle spasm. His left arm shot out, sweeping across the table with pretend clumsiness, and slammed directly into the soup bowl. Crash! The porcelain bowl flew through the air, hitting the marble floor and shattering into 100 pieces. Red soup splattered everywhere, looking like a bloody crime scene on the pristine white tiles. Victoria spun around, the wine bottle clutched in her hand. Her smiling mask didn't just crack, it shattered completely. The mess, the defiance, the ruined plan, it was too much like the jam incident. It was too much of a coincidence. Her eyes, no longer sky blue but stormy gray, narrowed with a terrifying coldness. For the first time she looked at David not with pity or even fake love, but with pure, unadulterated suspicion. "You clumsy fool," she screamed, the words sharp and venomous. The sweet fiancé was gone, replaced by the monster Lily always knew was there. David put on the performance of his life. He let his head loll to the side, his breathing heavy. "I am so sorry, Victoria," he stammered, his words slurred. "My arm, it just jerked out of control." But Victoria wasn't looking at his limp arm. Her gaze was sharp as a razor. It flickered from the spilled soup to David's wide, pretending eyes, and then darted to the hallway. She caught a flash of blue, the color of Lily's dress, as the little girl tried to shrink back into the shadows. And in that instant she understood. A horrifying, chilling realization dawned on her face. Her expression morphed from raw anger into something far more terrifying. Cold, calculating comprehension. It wasn't just the clumsy girl. It was him too. They knew. They were working together. The mouse wasn't asleep in the cage. It was fighting back. She slowly turned her gaze back to David, who was still pretending to be weak and confused in his wheelchair. A slow, predatory smile spread across her lips. It was the most terrifying smile David had ever seen. It held no love, no warmth, no forgiveness. It was the smile of a wolf that had finally seen through the sheep's disguise and was ready to strike. She took a slow step towards him, her voice dropping to a silky, menacing whisper that promised a world of pain. "Oh, David," she said softly. "I see now. I see what's happening here." She leaned in close, her face just inches from his. "We can't have any more of these little accidents, can we?" The game was over. She knew that he knew. And in her cold, dead eyes, David saw a terrifying promise. She was going to end this. Tonight. The game was over. In Victoria's cold, merciless eyes, David saw his own death sentence. The pretense of love had vanished, leaving behind only the raw, ugly truth of her greed. She was no longer going to play the part of the caring fiancé. She was done with tricks and whispers. The monster was out and it was done hiding. "Since you are so prone to accidents," Victoria purred, her voice a venomous silk, "I think it's time you went to bed. You're clearly overtired." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Before David could react, she moved behind him and seized the handles of his wheelchair. With a strength born of pure rage and desperation, she spun him around and began pushing him forcefully out of the dining room and into the grand, cavernous hallway. "Victoria, stop!" David yelled, his own voice sounding shockingly strong in his ears. He grabbed the wheels of his chair, trying to fight back. But the poison, though weaker, had still taken its toll over the long months. His arms ached with the effort, and she was relentless, easily overpowering him. He knew where she was taking him. Her path was straight and purposeful, aimed directly at the heart of the mansion, the top of the grand, white marble staircase. The tragic accident that Marcus had planned was about to happen, but it would be no accident. It would be cold-blooded murder. "No one will hear you, David," Victoria hissed, her breath hot on the back of his neck as she pushed him faster. "They will just find you in the morning. A terrible tragedy. The poor, depressed invalid, confused and clumsy. It will be so very, very sad." Panic, pure and absolute, clawed at David's throat. He was being wheeled to his own execution, and he was powerless to stop it. But he had forgotten one thing. He wasn't powerless. He had an ally. "Stop." A tiny voice, but a voice as powerful as a thunderclap, echoed from the top of the stairs. Lily stood there, her small body planted directly in their path. Her teddy bear, Barnaby, was clutched in one hand, but her other hand was clenched in a fist. She was shaking from head to foot, but she did not move. Victoria came to an abrupt halt, her face twisting into a snarl of pure hatred. "Get out of my way, you little pest," she shrieked. "This has nothing to do with you." "No," Lily shouted back, her voice cracking but full of courage. "You're a bully. My mama says bullies only win when good people do nothing. And you are not going to hurt him anymore." Victoria let out a laugh, a sound so cruel and unhinged it didn't seem human. "Or what? Are you going to throw more jam at me?" She took a step forward, ready to shove the little girl aside and finish her terrible task. But in that moment, Lily remembered her final weapon. Her ultimate secret. Her hand dove into Barnaby's back and pulled out the small brown glass bottle. "I said stop," she screamed, holding the bottle up high. The light from the grand chandelier caught the skull and crossbones on the label, making it glisten. "I have the proof. I have the danger bottle. I'll show everyone." Victoria froze. Her blood ran cold. The power of attorney, the bank transfers, those could be explained away. But that bottle, that was the one piece of evidence that could send her to prison for the rest of her life. All her planning, all her evil, undone by a little girl and a stolen bottle. Her greed and her panic took over. All rational thought vanished. She let go of David's wheelchair. "Give that to me," she lunged towards Lily, her hands outstretched like claws. And that was the moment David had been waiting for. The second her hands left his chair, the second she took her eyes off him, he acted. Adrenaline, pure and potent, surged through him. He was not a builder. He was not a victim. He was a protector. He knew he couldn't stand. He knew his legs were useless. But his arms, the arms that had drafted blueprints for towers that touched the sky, were his. With a primal roar of effort, he launched his entire upper body forward and sideways, throwing himself out of his wheelchair. He crashed to the hard marble floor in a heap. Pain shot through him, but it didn't matter. His move had worked. He had tackled Victoria squarely at the ankles. His dead weight, combined with her forward momentum, was enough. She stumbled, letting out a screech of surprise, and fell backward. She didn't fall down the stairs. Instead, she crashed heavily against the towering, ornate grandfather clock that had stood silent guard in the hallway for over a century. The ancient clock wobbled violently on its base. From inside, with a loud, groaning crack of old wood and metal, one of the heavy, decorative brass weights broke free from its chain. It swung down like a wrecking ball on a short, brutal arc. The sound was dull, sickening. The brass weight struck Victoria squarely on the back of her head. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the floor in a silent, unconscious heap. The great clock ticked one last time and then fell silent. The battle was over. Maria came running then, drawn by the screams and the terrible crash. She stopped dead, her eyes taking in the impossible scene. Her employer, a paralyzed man lying on the floor, the beautiful Miss Victoria, unconscious beside him, and her own daughter, standing like a tiny triumphant soldier, still clutching a small brown bottle. The police arrived to a scene they could hardly believe. Marcus was arrested later that night, caught trying to flee the country. Faced with Victoria's confession and the mountain of evidence, the forged papers, the secret bank accounts, and the little brown bottle of poison, their entire evil empire crumbled to dust. 3 months later, David was in a place that looked nothing like his mansion. It was a world of clean white walls, gleaming steel bars, and the quiet encouragement of doctors. After analyzing the poison from the bottle Lily had saved, the medical experts made a discovery that was nothing short of a miracle. The drug Victoria was using was a rare, custom-made neuroinhibitor, Dr. Evans explained, his face glowing with an excitement David hadn't seen in years. It didn't just make you weak, David. It actively created a chemical wall, blocking the nerve signals from your brain to your legs. It was preventing your body's natural attempts to heal from the spinal injury. David stared at him, his heart beginning to pound. What are you saying, doctor? Dr. Evans smiled, the widest smile David had ever seen. Your original injury was bad, but it wasn't a complete severing of the cord like we thought. The poison made it seem that way. Now that it's out of your system, we're seeing faint signals. Your body is trying to reconnect. David, it's going to be the hardest work of your life, but we believe you can walk again. And he worked. Harder than he had ever worked building his towers. Maria was no longer just a housekeeper. She was his head of operations, his friend, and his rock, managing his home and his business with a strength and intelligence he had never noticed before. He insisted that she and Lily live in the mansion not as staff, but as his family. Every day after school, Lily would come to the rehabilitation center. She was his tiny, fierce coach. She counted his leg lifts. She cheered when he was able to stand, shaking between 2 parallel bars for 10 seconds. She held his hand when the pain made tears stream down his face. David is standing. On his own 2 feet. He is holding onto the back of a garden bench, but he is standing. Maria is watching from a distance, her face a picture of pure joy. Lily walks up to him, a proud smile on her face. You're crying again, Mr. David, she says, her voice full of mock seriousness. David laughs, the sound deep and truly happy. He wipes a tear from his eye. I know. I can't help it. I told you, Lily says, her brown eyes sparkling with the wisdom of a hero. Stop crying. You'll walk again. Everyone had mocked her. The nurses, Victoria, even David in his heart had thought it was a cruel fantasy. Until it wasn't. David slowly, carefully lets go of the bench. His legs tremble but they hold him. He takes one shaky, miraculous step forward. Then another. He walks, slowly and unsteadily, right to the little girl who saved him in every way a person can be saved. He kneels down, his movements awkward but full of grace, until he is face to face with her. No, Lily, he says, his voice thick with emotion as he pulls her into a hug. I didn't do it. We did it. Together, in the warm afternoon sun, the man who had forgotten how to hope and the little girl who had refused to stop believing stood as living proof that the bravest hearts often come in the smallest sizes, and that sometimes, the most impossible prophecies are the ones that come true.